So with that being said, let's go ahead and start to work on some real problems. So you're going to find I'm not going to use those formulas because I don't like those. So we're going to start right off on exercise. Whoops, I hate when I do that. 10.1. And it's, let me get it here, on page 463. And we're going to do parts 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm going to show you how I always set up 4 that hopefully, you know, will make sense to all of you and Tracy and what have you. So let's go ahead and start with 10.1, and they give us a ton of numbers, it seems like. And keep in mind, if you're really working at a company, it all makes sense, what have you. And if you think about it, they're making helmets in this case. And it makes sense that you have some standard for, in this case, how many kilograms of plastic are going to go into a helmet. It makes sense to know, to have some sort of standard for how long it's going to take. If you don't, how are you going to know, if you're at a call center, if you're working at a call center and you don't know how long the average call should take, how are you going to ever judge if people are doing things in a timely manner or not, or being efficient or not? So you got to have some standards, okay? And those standards apply not only to, how long it's going to take, but in this case, how much materials are going to go in, okay? So in case in part 1 of this problem, okay, it says that what is the standard quantity of kilograms that's allowed to make 35,000 helmets? Well, if we're going to make 35,000 helmets, we have to know how many kilograms. And one of the problems, and I'm going to argue with this, this chapter, but they've been telling me for my entire life that we're going to go to the metric system. But y'all, we still measure stuff in pounds. Okay, we still do things in ounces. And I know it's, one would think that after, almost 60 years, if we were really switching to metric, we'd have it down by now. But I challenge you to go to the store and try to find, find something in kilograms or whatever. The milk is still a gallon. Now it says 3.89 liters on it, but it's still a gallon. Okay. So then we take the number of helmets times the standard kilograms. Okay. And once again, for those of us in, the old system, we go, well, a kilogram is how much? And I have no idea, but they told us it's 0.6. Okay. So what they're using is 0.6 of a kilogram. Okay. A kilo is I think 2.2 pounds or 2 pounds or something like that. So that's what we have there. So we take the 35,000 times the 0.6, and the standard quantity of kilograms is 21,000. So that is our standard quantity of kilograms. And why do we need to know something like that? Well, first off, we can judge if our folks on the production floor, whatever, are being wasteful or not. Okay. But it also gives us an idea on how much we have to order. If we're going to make 35,000 helmets, we have to know how many kilograms of plastic to order. Okay. And that tells us we got to have 21,000. Okay. And that works into our budgeting, what have you, from last time, or 2 times ago, I guess. So that's part 1. That's the standard quantity of kilograms. Part 2 says, okay, what's the cost? What's the standard cost? Well, we take the standard quantity, which is 21,000, times the standard price, which is $8 a kilogram. And that'll give us the standard, I could call it cost. I'm going to call it standard cost. So that's 21,000 times 8, which is 168,000. Questions so far? And then part 3, okay, asks us for what's the spending variance? Well, the actual costs were $171,000. The standard costs were $168,000. So our material, and a quick other note here, folks, and this could very well be getting to part of the issue too. I mean, they're going to call, I mean, the spending variance and efficiency variance and what have you. This is a material spending variance. But ultimately, they end up to be like price or quantity variances and so ultimately, even, you know, efficiency, when it talks about efficiency, when it talks about labor or overhead, an efficiency variance is a quantity variance. Questions so far? Now the part where I think, if I understood Tracy's question and her confusion, what have you, I think if you follow this, you're always good. Okay. What I always put on the far left is my actual quantity and my actual price. What I put on the far right is the standard quantity and the standard price. Now, what I put in the middle is the actual quantity and the standard price. Okay. Now, I think I did this, and I've done this for 40 years or what have you, because it was easy for me to memorize. Okay. So, I mean, I think that's really why the reason why I got to this point and did it this way. But those are my 3 columns. And by doing this, I don't get confused with the signs. Okay, I don't get confused with the signs. So now, standard quantity, standard price. Well, I just figured that out. Okay, the standard quantity was 21,000, standard price was 8, so the total is 168. Oops. So I'm going to take the standard quantity is 21 grand. Standard price is 8, 168 grand. I already figured that column out. I already figured out the actual quantity and actual price. And a lot of times they'll even just tell me what that is. And in this case, that's exactly what they did. They told me what it was, 171,000. Okay. Now a quick note. Okay, I could figure that out. Okay, and I'll show you how here in a minute, because sometimes they do that and I want to know for various reasons. So now I'm going to fill out the middle column, and I take the standard price, which is 8. Okay, and now I need to find the actual quantity. I think they told us the actual quantity. Actual quantity is 22,005. Okay, and that's in the last sentence of that paragraph there. They manufactured 35,000 helmets using 22,005 kilograms of plastic. So the actual quantity is 22,500. Okay, now a quick note over here. I know that the actual quantity is 22,500. I could figure out the actual price by dividing 171 grand. Okay, divided by 22,500 will tell me what the actual price was. Okay, so I can figure that out. Whoops. So when I take 22.5 times 8, I get 180 grand. And now all I need to do is put my variances. Okay. Now, one other kind of quick note here. This is always my quantity variance. My quantity variance is always over there. My price variance is always over there. Okay. So my quantity variance is over there. So now I should have spent 168. I actually did 180,000. So that is a 12,000 unfavorable. I should have spent 168, spent 180, a $12,000 unfavorable quantity variance. Now the actual amount I spent was 171. At my standard price, it would have been 180. So that is a $9,000 favorable price variance. And overall, I have a $3,000 spending variance. So that's where that 3,000 comes from. So those are my variances. And what this is, and now what I'm looking for is then also explanations. Okay, what happened? You know, what have you? I have a quantity variance. I used more materials than I should have. Maybe I bought garbage materials and I had to throw some out. Maybe my employees don't have the appropriate training and some went to waste. Those are probably the two big ones. Okay. That being said, I got the stuff cheaper than 80 bucks. I have a price variance that's favorable in 9 grand. So I got the stuff cheap. That could also explain the quantity variance. I bought some cheap stuff and I had some waste, or I had some, stuff I had to throw out. So that's where my price and my quantity variance come into play. And by doing it this way, I don't have to worry about signs, what have you. I just have to put my thinking cap on, so to speak, and figure out which way things are going. Questions? Anybody? Oop. Moving on to 10.2. In this one, I am not going to do parts 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to skip right to 4 and show you how, once I've done 4, I've really done 3. Okay. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to put actual quantity, actual price, standard quantity, standard price, actual quantity, standard price. Now a couple of notes. This 10.2, we're talking about labor hours, whatever. So we're going to be talking in terms of an efficiency variance, but it's really in my mind always, once again, it's just, I'm going to call it a quantity variance. Yes, it's an efficiency. Okay, but it's really a quantity variance. And over here, I'm going to continue to call it a price variance, but 100% correct. It's a rate variance. So that's what I'm looking at. So those are my 3 columns. And now I can just fill in the numbers I know, fill in what I know. Okay. Let's see where we are here. During the most recent week, the company used 960 direct labor hours. Okay. And what I do is I just put in what I know. I know that we use, my actual quantity used was 960 hours. Okay. I'm just putting in what I know. The company paid its direct labor force a total of 19,200 for the work. So I know that the actual amount they paid was 19,200. Quick note, I don't know if that's necessarily the price there. Okay. Or $20 an hour. Oh, they told us that's $20 an hour. Okay. According to the standard card, the cost should be at $19.75 per hour. So the standard price should be 19.75 and 19.75. So now all I got to do is figure out this standard quantity. Now, this is the spot where the standard, that standard quantity, that part 1 would have perhaps helped. Okay. But let's go ahead and figure out what that is. It says that we produced 4,000 meals, and each one takes a quarter of an hour. So it says that we produced 4,000 meals. Each one takes a quarter of an hour. So the standard quantity to produce that would have been 1,000. And now, folks, I have my 3 columns. I've got 1,000 times 1975, which is 19,750. I've got 960, which are the actual hours worked, times 1975, which is 18,960. A lot of times they give us that number, and they did in this particular case, 19,200. Okay, now a quick note. Okay, and really, well, let's go ahead and figure out the variances. My standard was 19,750. The actual hours times the standard rate was 18,960. It's lower. So my efficiency variance, or my quantity variance, is, that's 4,790. Favorable. Should have spent 19,700. Actually spent 1896. So my efficiency variance is $790 favorable. However, the rate variance should have spent 18,960, spent 19,200. That is $240 unfavorable. And that is, this is my, I'm going to call it quantity variance or efficiency variance. This is my price variance or my rate variance. Hold it, 240. It's going to go, it's not 2,400. And so the total difference between the 19.2 and the 19.750 is 550. Should have spent 19.7, actually spent 19.2. So it's favorable, which is also the difference between the 790 and 240. So it's $550 favorable. Now, a couple of quick notes here. Okay, they spent a little time to get us here, and Mr. Sass likes to cut to the chase. Okay, this here calculation, 4,000 times 0.25, is part one of the question. This 19,750 is part two. This 550 favorable, yep, is part three. So if we go back and take a look where it says required, part one, that's that 4,000 times 0.25 to give us 1,000. The part two, what's the standard labor cost allowed? That's that 19,750. It's 1,000 times 19,750, $19.75. And then that part three is 550 favorable, which is the difference between the 19,750 and the 19.2. That's part three. And then part four is what we just did. Now, explanation, kind of, what's going on here, what have you. We should have used 1,000 hours. We actually used 960. That's probably a good thing. We use less hours than we should have. Okay. So it's a favorable discrepancy. That being said, I paid more than I would have expected. I paid 20. I would have expected to pay only 19.75. Maybe my best employees were working overtime, so I had to pay them some extra, and my worst employee or employees were sick that day. So I ended up paying a little more, but they were able to do it in fewer hours. Possible explanation. Questions? Tracy, is this helping?
Actually, it is helping. Thank you.
That's all I want to hear, my friend. That's all I really want to hear. But I mean, I don't know why when they give me all those formulas, and I'm a math guy and a formula guy, what have you, I should be eating them up. But when I just do it this way, it just seems to it seems to make sense. And I really think it's from the days where, I had to memorize all this stuff, and it's like that was just the easiest thing to memorize rather than some formula. And then remembering positive numbers are bad and negative numbers are good.
Yeah, actually, even looking at Exhibit 10.4 in the chapter, I was still like, I don't know. So I just kind of set it aside. So this breaks it down even smaller for me. It helps me.
Good deal. And once you get one, they're really all the same. I mean, they're really all the same. I mean, yeah, they're calling it an efficiency variance instead of a quantity variance, or a rate instead of a price. But, as long as you realize rates and prices are the same, quantity and efficiency is the same, you're in pretty good shape. Now, and I'm going to mention this, not because it's going to come up on this question, but it's going to come up. There are going to be some times, just to kind of confuse Tracy or what have you, where I'm going to have to come up with two middle columns. Okay. I can use one middle column and it only occurs to my knowledge for materials. The question comes up, what if I purchase and use different amounts? So I purchased more than I used and I put some in the warehouse. Maybe I got a great deal. Okay. In that particular case, I may from time to time use 2 of the middle columns, and I'll show you how to do that here in a couple of minutes. Not with the next problem, but with one of the problems we're going to work on today. Okay. And the beauty of doing this, folks, and the reason why companies do this is now I know where my operations perhaps need improvement. I don't want to say who to blame, although sometimes that's exactly what it's used for. Okay. But I want to point out, okay, what did I do well? What do I need to work on? Okay. And by looking at rate variances, a lot of times I'm going to be looking at things like, especially with materials, did I buy cheap stuff and cheap is cheap? Or did I buy good stuff and good is good? Okay. Or did I have to pay extra for shipping for some reason or extra for whatever? Okay. And quantity variance tells me, how good my employees are doing theoretically. Are they doing what needs to be done? Keep in mind, the quantity could be related to the rate, especially with materials, but it could also be reflective of my training, the employees that are working for me on that particular project, what have you. So with that being said, that was 10.2. I'm going to go to 10.4. And once again, I'm going to do it as one problem, kind of just and show you where the various parts are. And I'm going to start with standard labor hours. We're going to start with labor hours. Okay, but we're going to go ahead and go. So we're going to go actual. I should. Actual quantity, actual price. Standard quantity, standard price. Actual quantity, standard price. So that's coming from there, that's going there. Okay. And, so now we can go ahead and fill in. And like I said, I like to go through the problem then and just kind of fill in what I know. Okay. And so now as I'm reading the problem, the standard rate, okay, is $17 an hour. So my standard price is 17 and 17. I know that. Okay. That's my standard price. During August, 5,750 of direct labor hours were used. So I know that my actual quantity was 5,750. So I know that's 5,750. Don't always know what my total direct labor costs were 102,350. So they didn't tell me what the rate was, but I know that it's 102,350. Now I can take 5,750 times 17, which is 97,750. And now I'm going to have to figure out my standard quantity. Okay, they told me I produced 20,000 units. They told me I produced 20,000 units. They told me that it should have taken 18 minutes. Okay, it should have taken 18 minutes, which happens to be 0.3 of an hour. Now, how do you get that? 18 over 60 should be 0.3. Let me just. Sure enough, 0.3. So that's, so the standard quantity then will be, and keep in mind, you can take it times that, but 20,000 times 0.3 is 6 grand. And 6,000 times 17 is 102 grand. Now, the other benefit of this is, and it's kind of going backwards, what have you, but should have spent 102, actually spent 97,750. That's a good thing. So it's favorable, and it's 4,250. Actually spent 102,350. Should have spent to produce that amount, 97,750, excuse me. That's not a good thing. And that's 250, 600, 4,600. So that's 4,600 unfavorable. So this is my rate variance, or as Mr. Sass calls it, price. This is my quantity variance. That's what Mr. Sass calls it. Okay. But in reality, since it's a labor, it's an efficiency variance. And overall, my spending variance is 350. Actually spent 102,350, should have spent 102, so that is unfavorable. Now, once again, this is problem number, or really exercise number 4. This is exercise 4. Usually write it on the top. Don't know why I didn't this time. So that's exercise 4. And once again, okay, I didn't do it. This is part 1. This is part 2. That's part 3. And the whole thing is part 4. So it had us calculate all those before we went ahead and questions on that? Well, that's parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. Keep in mind the whole thing was 4. Now we're going to do part 5. Whoops. So now we need part 5. And part 5 is for the same problem, it's overhead. Okay. Just like, you know, we're going to have quantity, we're going to have variances for quantity of materials used. We're going to have labor variances, and we're going to have overhead variances. That's really about it. So we've got 3 different items. But the beauty is once you've got my little secret down, it doesn't take all that much to calculate it, because as you remember, we're going to put actual over here. So we're going to put actual quantity actual price. We're going to put standard quantity, standard price. And then here we're going to put actual quantity, standard price. Okay. And notice one other item here, which I hope is apparent, but you know, since all I'm changing here is actual price, standard price, this is going to give me a price variance. And since over here, I'm not changing the price, but I'm changing the quantity, that gives me a quantity variance. So that's how those quantity and price variances are showing out. It's just a matter of what did I hold constant and what did I make the change to. Okay, so that's the reason why I know where my price and my quantity is. And now all I need to do is go ahead and fill in. Okay, let's see what we've got here. The budgeted variable manufacturing overhead rate is $4 per direct labor hour. So we know that standard price is $4. So we can go ahead and put the $4 in. During August, the company incurred $21,850. So we know that the actual is $21,850. So that's there. Now I need to know my standard quantity and my actual quantity. And budgeted variable is $4 per direct labor hour. So we're going to use the same labor hours that we used before. So if we scooch up, we used 6,000 and 5,750. So we want to use 6,000 and 5,750. And that's not at all uncommon to use the same, you know, labor hours, what have you, for overhead that we used for direct labor. So now all we need to do is multiply it out, 24 grand. 5,750 times 4 is 23 grand. And here we have the 21,850. Note, I mean, I didn't put the numbers in, but I mean, we could have obviously, and I'll show you, I'll figure it out here in a minute. Keep in mind the 5,750s over there. They didn't tell us what the rate was. Keep in mind, for the most part, I hate to say this, you don't need to calculate it. There's no need, okay? But we can calculate it by taking 21,850 divided by 5,750, and we get $3.80. Okay, so we can calculate it if we want to. There's usually no need, but sometimes that may be beneficial. So now I can go ahead. The difference here is $1,000, and it's favorable. And keep in mind, it's a quantity variance or an efficiency variance. Really, it's an efficiency variance. Okay. This one here is also positive, 1,150 favorable. And that's a price or a rate, call it the rate, just to be nice to them, variance. And overall, it's 2,150 favorable, and that's my spending variance. questions? Let's do exercise 10.7. And notice, and this is one of those where I'm going to do 2 items, and I just want to 10.7. It says refer to the data in 10.6. So we're going to use the data above it. Assume instead of producing 4,000 units, the company only produced 3,000 using 14. The rest of the material purchased remained in raw materials inventory. Compute the material price and quantity variances for the month. Okay, so we purchased more than we actually used. And this happens all the time. Okay. So let's go ahead and figure out the price and quantity variances. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to put standard quantity over here. Standard price. Actual quantity. Actual price. Now this is going to be one where I am going to have 2 middle columns. Okay. I'm going to have an actual quantity, standard price here, and an actual quantity, standard price here. And now the question is, I'm sure Tracy's thinking this, why? I just had done such a great job figuring out exactly why is he now putting 2 separate columns? Because notice what's going to happen here. Okay, we purchased and we used differing amounts. Okay, well, a lot of times in a lot of companies, a purchasing manager is just going to be purchasing stuff, and the guy on the floor is just going to be using this stuff, and we want to evaluate them based upon what they actually purchased or whatever. So when we're figuring out a price variance, when we are figuring over here, we're going to have price variance. Over here, we're going to have quantity variance. When we calculate a price variance, we want to use the amount purchased so that we can evaluate the individual who purchased it based upon the amount they purchased. Over here, we want to evaluate the individual on the production floor, whatever, based upon how much they actually used. So in this particular case, I need 2 middle columns. Okay. I mean, if you're really using just in time and you're using everything that's coming in the door and you're using it just as it's going out the door, it's not an issue. But where you're purchasing and using different amounts, it is an issue. So now let's go ahead and fill out the columns. Okay. And notice, and where is it? It says on 10.6 Part A, 20,000 pounds of material were purchased at a cost of $235. So I know that the actual quantity purchased was 20,000. I know the actual price was $235. So that's going to be 20,000. That's actual quantity. Now my standard price The standard price or rate, going back to 10.6 in the table there, is $2.50. So we've got 20,000 times 250 or 50 grand. Oh, boy, my writing gets sloppy sometimes. And we've got 20,000 times 235, which is 47 grand. So the price variance is a $3,000 favorable price variance. So we should go buy the purchasing manager, whoever that is, a drink or give them a bonus or whatever, because to purchase 20,000 units, to purchase 20,000 pounds, was it 20,000 pounds? He should have spent 250. He got it for 235. Don't know why. He got a deal. Great job. So now we're going to go and take a look at what happened on the production floor here. Keep in mind, okay, now I am going to use, okay, the standard price is 250. Let me use black. Standard price is 250. So that 250 is there, that 250 is there. Now the standard quantity, direct materials, okay. They told us we made instead of producing 4,000 units, they produced 3,000 units. So they produced 3,000 units, and each one should use 4.6 pounds. So we produced 3,000 units at 4.6 pounds. That should be 13,800. And the actual quantity they used, and this is probably coming from 10.7, they actually used 14,750. So they actually used 14,750. So I take 14,750 times 250, and I get 36,875. And I've got 13.8 times 250, or 34.5. And so this is a quantity variance. Should have spent 34.5, actually spent 36,875. So that's $2,375 unfavorable. And that's my quantity variance. So the purchasing manager, I'm going to say, did a great job, got us the stuff cheap. The production manager on the floor did not do such a good job, okay, used more pounds than he should have. Now, he might have used more pounds because the employees haven't been trained in properly doing, what have you. They might be new employees, so there was some waste. Or it might have been the purchasing manager bought crap, and the production manager is paying the price for it. Purchasing manager looks really good. The production manager, not so much. Questions? So you use different middle columns. I mean, keep in mind, it's still actual, it's still standard, but you use different middle columns in the event, okay, that the amount purchased and used was different. You used purchased for price, you use used for quantity. Questions? Make sense? Let's do one more. And this is the one right after it, 10.8. And this is asking for 2 of them once again, not 2 middle columns. It's asking for a price variance. Oh, I got to do both of them again. It's okay. So we're going to do price variance and labor variance, or materials and a labor variance. Notice they produced 3,000 maze toys. And notice it says direct materials, 25 microns. Keep in mind, I have no clue what a micron is. You just kind of got to take it sometimes and what have you. There was one time where this book used other foreign currencies, and that was really fun because not only were they using, you know, a term, a micron, which I have no idea what it is. I'm sure it means something to some science people. And they were using foreign currencies. So I had twice as much opportunity to screw something up. And notice 5,000 were still in inventory at the end of the month. So I am going to have, this is going to be a price variance. Pardon me, this is going to be a materials variance. And I am going to have 2 middle columns. So I'm going to put actual quantity, actual price. Actual quantity. Standard price. And then over here, I'm going to have standard quantity, standard price. And here I am going to have actual quantity. Actual quantity, standard price. Oh yeah. Actual quantity, standard price. Okay. This is going to be my price variance. This is going to be my quantity variance. This is going to be about on the amount purchased. This is going to be on the amount used. So now we can go ahead and fill in our columns. The amount that was purchased was 25,000 microns. As you've already heard, I have no idea what that means. Okay. The actual price, $1.48. That's from direct materials right under the table there. It's telling us. So the actual price was $1.48. And the standard price was $1.50. And that is coming from the little table there at $1.50. So I've got 25,000 times $1.50, which is 37.5. And I've got 25,000 times $1.48. So it's 2 cents less. So we got a 2 cents less, which is 37 grand. Comparing those two numbers, that's $500 favorable. That's a price variance. Now the standard quantity, and keep in mind, this is a quantity variance, so I'm going to use different amounts. I'm not going to use that 25 grand. They produced 3,000 toys. So I produced 3,000 toys. Each one uses 6 microns. So that's 18,000. And the standard price was $1.50. So I've got 18,000 times $1.50, which is 27 grand. I'm going to still have $1.50 here, but the question is how much did they actually use? Ah, 20,000. And you go, well, Mr. Sass, it didn't tell us anywhere how many they used, and you're 100% correct. What it did tell us is they purchased 25,000. It told us that they had 5,000 left in inventory. AKA they must have used 20 grand. Okay. AKA they must have used 20 grand. So we kind of got to back into that number, folks. And that's 30 grand. Difference is $3,000. Unfavorable. That's my quantity variance. Questions on that one? So that's my price and my quantity variance. This is my direct materials. This is materials. So now let's do our labor variance. Now I only need 3. The only time I use 2 columns in the middle is for materials when I've got different amounts purchased versus used. Okay, so I'm going to put actual over here. Okay. Actual quantity, actual price. Standard quantity, standard price. Okay. Standard price. Actual quantity. And now I can go ahead and just kind of fill in the numbers I have here. Direct labor is $21 an hour. So I know that's $21 an hour. Direct labor, 4,000 were worked at a cost of 88 grand. Well, I know this is 88 grand. Actual quantity used was for, read the number and then $4,000. So we've got 88 grand. Here we've got 84 grand. Okay. Now we've got the $21 an hour. We have to figure out the standard quantity. 1.3 hours. And they produced 3,000. So we know that they produced 3,000 toys at 1.3 hours each. So that's 3,900 hours. So I've got 3,900 times 21, which is 81.9. Should have spent 81.9, actually spent 84. That is a $2,100 unfavorable. It's $2,100 unfavorable. And here we should have spent 88. We should have spent 84. We actually spent 88. That's 4,000 unfavorable. So keep in mind, this we're varying the price. So this is my price variance. Over here, this is my quantity variance. And my spending variance is 6,100 unfavorable, and that is my spending variance. Notice, I do not calculate a I don't calculate a spending variance for my materials variance when I have different middle columns, because I have different I have different values. I have 25,000 versus 20,000. A spending variance makes no sense up here because I have 2 middle columns and I'm not using the same amount of quantity. Okay, it only makes sense where I've purchased and used the same amount or purchased and used the full amount. I don't have any left in inventory. Questions? Tracy, did we solve many of your issues?
I think so. This week's assignment will tell.
Isn't it funny how that always works, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of a quick note here is we're finishing up for, don't do that. Next week, we have, and I think I put them all together, the Learn Smart for chapters 11 and 12. What I'm doing is I'm covering parts of both. They used to all be one, and so I just like to keep them together. So I'm going to do parts of 11 and parts of 12, but I've 90% confident I've merged the two, so you're good to get you'll be good to go there. And then the assignment for chapter 10. Okay, and kind of the plan of attack is next week. We will obviously do what we've been doing for chapters 11 and 12. So the 20th, we will, do 11 and 12. And the 27th, we'll use kind of as a review and ask any questions. And then that'll pretty much be the end of the semester. And then we'll take the final exam. I've pushed you guys early in the semester, as you'll recall. And didn't give you any time off when we crammed some stuff. So we've got about an extra week here. So we're in good shape there. And that's kind of what the rest of the semester looks like. Any questions?